In recent years, more and more Australians have listed their religion as none. In 2006, just under 20% of Australians defined themselves as not religious. 10 years later, that number was 30%. Journalist and author Monica Dux is among them. Her new book, Lapse, tells the story of her Catholic upbringing and explores how it shaped her and how she left it behind. We are lucky enough to have Monica with us on the panel tonight. Welcome to The Drum.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your book. Now, one of the central questions you are asking is, once a Catholic, always a Catholic. True?
Yes. Look, I was fascinated by that question because I was brought up very Catholic. I went to Mass every week, I went to Catholic school, I was very devout, I wanted to be a nun. And I left it all behind, so I thought when I was a teenager, I don't believe in God anymore. I haven't believed in God since I was a teenager. And yet I still felt shadowed by my Catholicism for decades. And it wasn't just me. I know so many people who are the same. And I think Catholicism is a religion that very much does that. It persists and it leaves a mark on you. And so I wrote my book because I was very keen to find out, well, who are we? Because as you said in your introduction, non-belief is growing. And there are probably more lapsed Catholics in the world than actual Catholics. And I wanted to explore what that was because I felt like I had this community of people who had grown up in a very religious world and left it behind, but we hadn't quite figured out what to do with it decades after.
Right, but you were like, as a 10-year-old, you played the part of Jesus in a primary school play. On your cover, is this you in a confirmation dress on the cover?
That's my first Holy Communion.
Oh, your first Holy Communion. Okay, yeah. Very angelic looking here.
I was. Yeah.
And then to kind of get rejected as a teenager and struggle with some of the political issues and problems that the church has had, you know, at an institutional, cultural level. You then have when you're in Rome, your daughter suddenly says to you that she's interested and she wants to be baptised, right?
Yeah, and that was a real challenge for me, and that sort of triggered the book because I'd always thought about the fact that I felt that this Catholic identity had stayed with me. But I was in Rome, family holiday, first time I'd been to Rome, and we're in this beautiful church, and I turn around and there's my daughter praying. And I had brought my kids up until that point in a very non-religious way. They weren't baptised. I don't think she'd even stepped into a church in Australia. And she was suddenly saying to me, I want to be Catholic. And at that age, children are always seeking meaning. And so in a way, it was natural for her to be looking to some higher purpose and trying to understand her existence. But the fact that she wanted to be Catholic was very challenging to me. And it set me back on this journey to say why I felt so much conflict about the church. And I think that is something that a lot of lapsed Catholics still feel. And not just because of the way we're brought up and leaving religion, but also very much today to do with abuse that the church has perpetrated. And so I tried to unpack what that was for me as a child, but also what do I do with it now? Because as I looked at my daughter, I didn't know what to say to her about the church.
I want to bring Peter in here now because I know that all of the issues that Monica's raising, you have grappled with as well. How do you deal with the question of sexual abuse in the church or domestic violence that's perpetrated by clergy? Or the treatment of women and LGBTQI community.
Thanks, Julia. I mean, my first thing I wanted to say is, Monica, I'm halfway through your book and it's fabulous. And my confession is I always wanted to be Mary in the Nativity play when I was a kid and I never got the gig, so I'm really jealous you got to be Jesus.
It's not over yet. It's not over yet.
It's not over yet.
There's still time.
I know. Christmas is coming. The thing I guess I was really struck by in Monica's question is one I often notice, and there's something particular I will say about Catholicism and Catholic identity that is really, really strong. But on reflecting on it, I'd want to separate out the issues of identity and culture from the issue of faith because I don't think they're necessarily connected. So I'm a Reformation historian. A lot of writers in the Protestant Reformation from both Catholic and Protestant sides talked about the need, whatever happened, whatever your beliefs, to remove the abuses in the institution. And, you know, Monica's book, like so many others, documents clearly the horrendous abuse that's come from within the church. So, I'm a true believer and I do tend to work from the principle of reform from within precisely because of the faith principles that I hold. But I'm still fascinated by the sort of legacy questions that Monica's raising about how it sticks to you over time.
Yeah, sorry, Monica.
Oh, it's an interesting one because when I wrote the book, I didn't want to tell people what to believe. And I think that's a really important thing. I don't believe that rejecting religion outright is in any way helpful because we're all seeking meaning. And, the fundamental question of our existence is, why are we here? Who are we? I think it's very true. And I think Peter pointing that out, it's an institutional question. And what struck me was that there are so many lapsed Catholics people who don't go to church, don't believe in God even, and who still have this identification with the church and still participate. And I found that quite troubling. And there are many Catholics, for instance, who will keep baptising ex-Catholics who will baptise their children and send them to Catholic school or tick even Catholic on the census. And that interplay between a relationship with the institution and their personal beliefs and the inability to really sever that is something that I was quite fascinated by, and I really wanted to figure out why we were doing that and why we felt compelled to do that.
Is it because there's something also people find comforting? I mean, you've said yourself you still feel the impulse to pray.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think Catholicism is a very specific Christian denomination in the way that it really gets under your skin, I suppose. I mean, there's a lot of ritual in Catholicism. There's a lot of I'll say magical thinking, that we see the divine all around us. When you're brought up Catholic, you understand the world is quite miraculous. You see saints and you look to the heavens in a way that a lot of other Christian denominations don't do as much. You search your soul. And so I think that imprints very young, when you're very young, and it stays with you. But I also think that particularly for Catholicism today, and this is a question that all institutions are grappling with, but particularly for Catholicism, the institutional abuse that we've seen perpetrated against children has really created this urgency to understanding, well, it's all very nice, but what am I going to do with that because I'm still considering myself in some sense Catholic and I'm still participating?
Aurora, we're talking about the number of people who, are ticking no religion is increasing. And of course, you don't have to be religious to have a moral code. Where does your moral code come from?
Yeah, I think everyone has some sort of schema for understanding the world, a moral code to guide their actions, and a desire, I think, as the writer said, for community, a sense of belonging and meaning in the world. So for me, my identity as a Bulgar Aboriginal woman, that's what guides what I do and my responsibilities to my family and my community, and also that connection to country and the laws that are kind of within that. So I think everyone is looking for that, and I think what the church has is this kind of little duality between faith, moral schema, culture, which is also really important in that community sense of belonging, but then it has the institutional aspect, which can be really problematic. And we know that lots of these religious institutions, like political institutions and other big institutions, recreate patriarchal, colonial structures and power systems that, we discussed in the topic around consent are some of the problems with allowing people to be different and to have diverse points of view. So it's the institutional arm that can be really difficult, but I think everyone is looking for some meaning, and it's really important to understand your community and your culture and what guides you in life.
Peter, why is the church losing adherents? Why are the congregations draining out? More people are ticking no belief.
Sure. The first thing, of course, not all churches are losing adherents, but yeah,
no,
across the board,
overall,
they
overall,
are.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of things going on. One is the sort of, institutions are on the nose, organised religion more so than any. And I think on the one hand, human beings congregate together. We've known through COVID, we want to do things together. So institutional life is part of our reality. But the problem for religious institutions is we make big promises, and if we fail to keep our high standards, we're hypocrites, and that creates a particular challenge. I think the other issue, though, is deeper, and particularly in Australia, we live by and large in what is historically an extremely prosperous society. And one of the premises of religion, all religions, I think, is that there's something wrong. There's something broken in us, there's something imperfect. We need to do better, if not in ourselves, then in the service of others. And convincing people of that in a prosperous society, I think, is really hard. So, a basic premise of Catholicism, of Christianity, is that human beings are sinful and need redemption. That's a hard sell, I think, in our current age.
Yeah, quickly, Monica, because I just want to bring Karen in, yes.
Oh, I just think we tend to confuse. So one of the interesting things about understanding why people leave religion is, you know, half a century ago, the focus was that if you actually left religion and you weren't aligned to a religious institution, there was like a lack. But increasingly, social scientists are starting to say, well, just because you're not aligned to a religious institution doesn't mean that you don't believe things and you don't have an ethical code and you don't find meaning in your life. And I think that's a really important point to make when talking about religion and belief in general.
Although there still are a range of studies which talk about religious attendance and going to local communities and congregations is good for your health. There's a raft of those which have been brought out of Harvard. So there's still those ameliorating
factors.
factors.
joining a choir.
And joining a choir, which actually
and being
Peter
part
does.
of a community group. Yeah,
so he's going to sing the drum theme on the way out. But Karen, you're bucking this trend because you converted to Judaism.
Yeah, I did, to progressive Judaism over 20 years ago now. Looking at this through a health and wellbeing lens, spirituality is one of the determinants of health, and there are a lot of people who are looking to religion of one variety or another as something that fits with their core values and their core beliefs. And it's also a matter of community and culture as well. And so for people to find a community and a culture within a religion is something that has resonance for them is really important. But I think the other important point that was raised earlier is that a lot of people have been very disenchanted by religion through the institutional child abuse findings and through, I think also during the marriage equality debate, a lot of people found that religion was something that they were damaged by if they were LGBTQI, for example, or if they had family members who, because of religion, had discarded them as family members, for example, not accepted them. And so, you know, it's complicated, but I think that there are a lot of people who do still need an organised institutional type of religion as a framework for their spirituality. And also from, you know, a doctor's point of view, a lot of people do turn to religion at times of hardship, when they're facing grief, when they're facing loss, when they're facing a serious medical crisis or death. And so it still forms an important part of many of our lives.